so we're going to be talking about object-oriented design. So the idea is, how do we do this? How do we go from the requirement document to design to implementation? So part of that would be, so, and as I mentioned earlier, one single most important chapter in this book would be this chapter 12. And I would strongly suggest you spend a lot of time in this chapter 12. It is going to take you places that, when you go for an interview or, it's just very, very important chapter. So we need to pay attention to this. I'm giving us a couple of weeks for this chapter to be sure we really understand it. Okay, so we are talking about how do we find new classes. So we have we have somebody on the chat. Umpire method is good framework for technical review. What do you mean, umpire, Brian?
It's because you said the technical interview, so I don't know. I don't think it mentions the Empire method, but I think it's a good way to structure.
Well, some of those things are just tools. Some of them we're going to be talking about it. So even though we're going to be doing a lot of software engineering processes here, this is not a software engineering course. So those methods and tools you're going to spend on it in your software engineering course. We're going to be doing the best we can do. The focus is object-oriented design. And as we talked before, we have a business document, a technical document. We will have a test. How we're going to be testing. We're going to have user guide that when we finish the project, how do the people need to do this one? So we have two types of user guide. One is for technical people to install it. If it has some direction, you have to install this and that. And then another one is for the customer. So the reason for getting the sample test from the user is at the end of the project, we can test it. Then we have two types of testing. We have alpha testing and beta testing. Alpha testing, we're going to be testing it in-house. So if you look at the version control, you see that we have odd number and we have even number. Generally, you don't see the even numbers. The even numbers are the one that we do in-house testing, and the odd number is the one that we're going to send it out. So if this is for a customer, we are going to be doing our testing in-house, and then we're going to take it to the customer and we're going to test it over there. And depending on the project and how much critical is the project, then the testing is going to vary. So my friends in JPL, when they want to send the shuttle out, not the shuttle, the satellite out for weather, they were testing it for 1 year. And I guess that Chinese one that's coming back to the Earth, they did not do enough testing on it. So somebody messed up somewhere, and now the whole thing is coming back in the Earth and it's going to crash to somewhere somehow. Hopefully it's going to be in the ocean. So you can see that if we don't properly design, implement, or test, then we're going to have some consequences for it. So it can be, some of the programs that we are writing, it can be not a big, huge thing. So Microsoft create stuff and send it out there and say, okay, people are going to test it out. And if my Word crashes, not a big deal. We're going to upload the new version or updated version. But if the plane is going to crash, then we're going to have some serious problem. And we saw that in Boeing system, that they didn't do enough testing. So the planes were crashing and people were dying because of the software that they didn't do good enough testing on it. So all of these things connected to each other, and it's very, very important to be able to do all of these things. And the question is not what's my software is doing right now. The question is what's my software going to do in the future? What can go wrong in the future? How can I capture it, and what can I do about it? So we're going to go through all those things with our final project as much as we can. So in this chapter, we're going to be focusing on designing objects, and then we're going to apply this to our final project. So we have our requirement document, and we're supposed to have a detailed requirement document. So we're going to be going to say, okay, how can I identify classes? So in general, we have two types. I mean, we have a lot of different ways of finding these things, and you will learn those things in your software engineering courses. In here, I want to focus on two types of design that I am familiar, and we're working on it in industrial. One is called the bottom-up design. One is called the top-down design. So we're talking about bottom-up and top-down. So when I was project manager and I was doing these kind of things, when the software engineers would join our group for the first time, they were complaining about doing these two times. And of course, I have the students that would complain the same thing. So if you bear with me and you go through the project, then you would see the reason behind it, that why I am, and I'm not the only one, people are fond of these things. Yes, it's going to take a little time at the beginning, but it's going to save us a lot of time at the end. So bottom up, basically, you take your requirement document, you break it down to the smallest pieces, and then you build your classes based on those smaller pieces. So if I am going to the smallest piece, that would be my data, that would be my variables, and then I put related ones together to create a class. Then the top down, generally the way that we were doing in industry was we would take the forms and we would take the what is it that the customer end user want to see. So we would have the graphic designers to look at the form or basically create the form. There is no functionality on it, it's just a picture. So we, in this class, we're going to use regular drawing. I can draw on pen and paper. I can use some drawing tools from internet or whatever we have, and we're going to be drawing it. So we have a visual representation of what the project's going to look like. So if I have a poker game, how is it going to look like? If I have a chess game, how is it going to look like? And then we're going to take that picture and then we're going to break it down looking for classes. So that's the top down, and then we have the bottom up. Now, the reason that I want to do both of them is when we do one, we're going to be missing something. And I can guarantee you, if you do it correctly, you will see that. So if I do bottom up and if I do top down and I compare these two together, I can find out that there are some stuff, some classes is missing because for some reason it wasn't on the forms or it wasn't in the, so it's in the form, but it's not in my requirement document or vice versa. So those are the things that we're going to be working on, and we're going to see how is it done.
So there's a test-driven development to it. That would be like another way to structure the classes and methods.
Well, there are different ways. There is a quick, or we can create a sample one, and we can test it and figure out if it's going to be correct. We can create a portion of it. So especially when the projects are huge. So for example, if JPL want to send a rover to Mars, they're not going to create the rover. They're going to create a sample of a rover. They're going to be doing their testing on that sample because the rover itself is very, very expensive. And then if they figure out something is wrong, they can fix it. And then they're going to be working on the bigger one. Or we can look at one piece at a time. So there are different type of designs. Rapid design, they're going to be working on the classes, and they say we're going to catch the ones that we are missing later. So there are different designs that you're going to be exposed to it. I'm not going to go over all of those things in this class. We just don't have enough time, and this class is not that. So I'm going to just focus on these two, and then we see how far we can go with that. So when we do that, when we come up with our classes, now that I have classes, we can figure out the inheritance, aggregation, and dependency relationship. So if I have classes, and I'm going to be working on a visual representation of the classes, now I can say, okay, I have this class and I have that class. How do they connect to each other? How do they relate to each other? And then we can figure out these things based on the classes that we have found. And we're going to talk about the UML and how we're going to do the visual representation of our classes. I have worked, I mean, remember my working industry was a while back. Things are a lot different nowadays, but we had boards, whiteboards all over the place that people were drawing these things on it. And we had softwares that we were using to display these things. Of course, if I have, I don't know, 200 classes, putting them all on a page, it might not look, it's going to look very messy. So we have to come up with some ways of just focusing on one section at a time instead of looking at the whole thing. So that's the UML. That is the language, the way that we are presenting these things. It is used for a database as well. So you see it over here, you see it in your database class. And the most important part is when we have a project, how do we apply these things to it? So these are the things that we're going to go over in this chapter and in our final project to the end of the course. Any questions so far? Okay, so how do we do this? First of all, we have to have a good requirement document. So if we don't know what the customer wants, then I cannot write the program for it. If I cannot explain what is this project is doing, because sometimes students will come in and say, I want to do this project. And when I ask them what is the detail, write the detail, they say, well, I cannot write the details. If you cannot write the details, we cannot come up with a good solution. So we need to know the details of the things that we're going to be doing. Otherwise, it's not going to work. I mean, we can have a project that goes out there, but how do I know I'm addressing every single thing that the customer had in mind? So customer is thinking about something, I'm going to write the program about that thing. Till we don't put those thinking on the paper and we both agree that this is what we're going to be doing, then it's not going to happen. I can guarantee you it's not going to happen because we cannot read somebody's mind. So if somebody come and say, I want this project, and they said, okay, explain to me what is it, and they say they cannot explain it, I cannot write the program for it. So it's very, very important that we're going to have our requirement specification. And then, so we have different document. We have a business design or business document. And then we have technical. So when we're talking about business design, we are talking about high level. So when we are talking in our requirement document, we are not talking about what functions we're going to be using, or how we're going to be printing it, or what we're going to do. The details are not there, the technical detail. It's all about the business. It's all about high level. The customer doesn't know anything about coding. So my requirement document shouldn't have any coding in it. Do not put any coding in your requirement document. We're just talking about in a high level, what does it need to be done? Again, your requirement document has to be full sentences. We need those, and I tell you why do we need those. So that's what the requirement document is going to be. And then we will eventually change that to the technical document, which is going to be more of developers' document. So we're going to be looking at the specific language that we're using to see what tools is available in the language, what tools do we have that we can use to do this project, what expertise do we have that we can do this project. Those come in the technical part. It's not on the business part. And we're going to get to that as we go forward. So we're going to be discovering classes. How do we do that? We will be looking at nouns in the problem description. So your next assignment in your final project is to create nouns of your problem statement. So all you do, you're not thinking about classes, you're not thinking about anything else. You're going to go through your requirement document. You just identify the nouns and you just put it in a list. So you're going to have a list of nouns that is coming directly from your requirement document. Don't make up any more nouns that you don't have it. Don't make up classes. So a lot of times, the students, they know what they want to do. They create the classes and then they put the nouns in there. That's not the design. That's just writing the program for something else. If you want to do a design, you have to get your requirement document. You got to break it down to nouns and list them up. That's it. You're not thinking about anything else. You just take the nouns. So if I go to your project and I see the nouns that is not part of your requirement, or I see there are nouns in your requirement that is not in your list, then you are going to be deducted points. Don't come back and say, oh, I have to do this again. I'm telling you right now what is it exactly you need to do. That's going to be your next project for your final project. And then we need the methods. This is the reason that we all need to have full sentences. And again, the part that is related to the project. So you want to talk about some introduction or something, put that somewhere. That's not our concern. That means what? I'm not going to have the words something like I, you, those kind of things in the project. Because if I put I in the project, the I is a noun. That means I have to go create a class for I, which most of the time we don't know who I is. The person who's going to be reading the document doesn't know who I is. So stay away from those things that's not related to the project. Everything in the project, everything in your document, everything in the requirement document, I'm going to write the program for it. Every single thing you put it in your requirement document, I'm going to write a program for it. If you don't want it to be a part of the program, don't put it in there. So I need them in full sentences. That means avoid bullet points. No bullet points. So I need the methods. Why do I need the methods? Methods, I mean, the verbs are going to be my methods. So I'm going to take the nouns and I'm going to take the verbs. Nouns, verbs. Okay, I'm going to do the first part of your project a little different than your book. We can come back to it and do it again. So what we're going to be doing in the project, we're going to take the nouns and we're going to take the verbs. We're going to create a list of them. Now, the difference is going to come here. Your book is going to be looking for the classes. I am going to be looking for data. So I am going to look for data. That means the smallest noun that I can get. So if my noun can be broken down, so if I can break down my nouns, I will do that. Let me give you an example. So if I am doing a program for poker, and then in my requirement, somewhere I have a player. So I have to question this. Is player to the smallest format? How do I know if it's the smallest format? Is it integer? Is it a string? Is it a double? What is it? So if it's not that, that means it's not a smallest format. So now I have to take the player and ask the question that if I'm writing a program, what is it that I am keeping track of the player? So the question going to be, what is it I am tracking of? So when you say player, are you talking about player name? You're talking about player ID? You're talking about what is it that you're keeping track of? That's what I wanted to make it to the smallest possible. So when I do that, when I ask that question, then I have to go back and change my design. So I'm looking at the player and say, I don't know what I'm keeping track of the player. Maybe I'm going to have an ID for my player. So I'm going to go back and redo my requirement document. And instead of player, I'm going to say player ID. Then I take this one and I take it to the customer, and customer says, no, I want to keep track of their names. So now I have to go back and change it. So it is very, very important to have a communication with the end user. So we cannot do any kind of assumption. But in this section that we are going to be doing for the final project, I have to come up with the smallest data that's possible. So we are not going to be talking about poker game in my requirement document because my program is about poker game. I can talk about it in introduction somewhere or some
That
kind
would
of
be
explanation
in
somewhere.
the problem statement, right? In the problem statement, that's when you introduce like
Well,
the
remember,
concept of poker.
everything you put in your requirement statement, I'm going to write the program for it. So where do I create classes for poker or game? So those should not be part of my requirement that I'm writing these. So you can have poker game as a topic of your document. You can have it in some explanation somewhere. But when we are talking about the requirement document, every single noun that you put it in your requirement document, we're going to write the code for it. So do I want to write code inside my document? Do I want to create a class or do I want to create a data type for my poker game? So the question that I'm asking is, what is it I'm tracking of? When I say poker, what is it I'm tracking of? Is that the simplest format? If it's not, I'm going to break it down. And then those are the things that I'm saying. So when you're going, and we're going to spend enough time in this next week to go over it together in class to be sure you understand it. I'm telling you right now is because I want to be sure that you understand how detailed your requirement document has to be. I need nouns, I need verbs, and I need them to be as specific as possible. Are we clear on this? Anybody has any questions? This is the part that you have to clear it out. Remember, if you don't do this, you will not get the points for it.
So for clarification, like we're going to do the business design and it's just a generalized like noun and verb that we can use in the design doc. So let's say we're doing like a recipe book like project, right? So then we would have a basic noun of recipe and it's like, oh, this contains all instructions and ingredients. And then like there would be a verb called like turn the page, and I was like, it turns the page of the current viewed recipe book.
So when we are talking about the recipe, generally the turn page is not there. So in a recipe, you're gonna say, take this many ounce of this product, this many, mix it up with these kind of things. So when you're explaining the requirement document, you're going to be thinking about you explaining it to a child that doesn't know anything, or when you're explaining the recipe to me that I don't have no idea how to cook something. So that's the detail. And generally, turn the page or things in that manner is not part of my requirement. We don't say that. So you're again, say this is. I'm glad that you asked that question, and I'm glad that you stayed with us, because when we are looking at things, remember we have two types of things. One is looking at the end result. So if you're looking at end result, you're looking at the forms, you're looking at how the GUIs look like, then maybe in there you have turn page. But in this section, we're just going to go to sentences and sentences and sentences describing what we're going to be doing. And it's going to be tough for some people because we all learn how to write code before we learn how to design code. And it's just like somebody wants to go to Olympic for swimming and they never had any official training. So now they have to go on, do some of the things they learn, and they have to do it correctly, correctly before they move on. And that's the situation that we are right now.
So how come, just a quick question, how come in the first introductory course, how come they don't expose and really emphasize the planning
it
step?
should be that way, but that's
instead
not
they
the
just
way
do
it
like,
is.
oh, it's code. Because I understand they're trying to
right,
make it exciting, promote it, and so they can get students. Right?
Well, we, not in this school, but in some other school that we had more power, we had a course before you take your programming class.
They had a CS1. Right?
It wouldn't be a CS1 type of thing, but
it was called, I think, CS1. Right?
Yeah, it would teach you how to design, and believe me, a lot of people didn't like it because they want to jump into the coding. But yeah, it's something like that. You're right. So it would be, but when we got to have too many courses and we had to drop a course, that was a course that was dropped. So that's, yeah, I agree with you that the design should be the very first course that people taking. It's going to be boring because you don't see the result right away. It's much fun that if you write a code and you see the result, but if you're drawing a stuff and you're making flow chart and those kind of things, you might not like it that much. I still don't like it because that's not what I want to do. I want to jump into the coding, but I know that I have to do it. So that's where we are right now. Any other questions about the requirement document and breaking it down to nouns and verbs? Remember, if you don't do this, you are not going to get the grade for it. There is no redo grading. I'm not going to grade it and then grade it and then grade it and then grade it because you don't do the correct job. You have a second chance to fix it in your final project and final date. But when I'm asking you to do this, when I'm asking you to take your requirement document, break it down to the smallest nouns that you have, the smallest verbs that you have, and you just make a list of it, you have a chance to ask questions right now. But if you don't do it, you're not going to get the points for it. Are we clear about it? All right.
And PCC used to have a course on Fortran, right? Like way back.
Oh, way back we had a lot of stuff. I don't know about PCC, but I remember
I
when I was going to
Fortran
school,
class.
There was a Fortran, there was Pascal, there was Ada, there was some language. Actually, Ada was very, very good language, was used in the military, but some of them didn't make it through. We did not have Java, we did not have Python, so things has changed. Okay, so I said we're gonna do 45. Let me spend a little more on this and then we go back. So to me, this is my top level. So I'm looking at forms, I'm looking at my GUI. So I'm gonna ask you guys to draw your GUI. How is this gonna look like when you wanna present it to the user? When user is playing your game, how is it gonna look like? It doesn't have to be fancy. In real life, we were having the graphic designers to design these things. I would not do it, I still cannot do it. So we're gonna do it with hand or in some tools. It doesn't have to be too very pretty. If we want to make it pretty to give it to the customer, we're going to hire graphical designers to make it pretty, or they might even have this. So let's say that I want to create a program for this company and they give me a invoice. This is what we have for the invoice. Now, this is a top-down design. That means I'm going to be looking at this and I'm going to be identifying my classes based on this. So I'm looking at this and saying, okay, how can I find classes? Classes are what? We have some data, we have some methods. So it's going to be a package that has everything that we want to see. That would be the second part, what we're going to be doing in our final project. So how do I identify classes over here? Some of them is going to be based on the experience. Some of them is going to be, we can see them. So I am looking at this and I say, okay, here I have a name, address, and basically that. So this can be a class by itself, or we're going to have it somewhere. So this, sometimes you see in the real life that you would have some information about the company, some information about the customer. Both of them are going to be there. So then I can define them as different classes. Then we go in there, the whole invoice as a whole. We can look at that one. It has a name and sometimes it has a number, invoice number. It has a total that's belong to that thing. And then it's going to have some kind of a lines. So the first time that I was looking at the invoice, this didn't come to me naturally. And I know it now because I have seen it before. So the book is calling it line item, something like that. So this one would have a name, it would have the quantity, it would have the price and a total. So that would be my line number, line item, and then that's going to be repeated multiple times. So the top-down design, I'm looking at the top level, I'm going to try to find my classes. If I do this correctly, my bottom up and my top down are not going to be exactly the same. So if you do your top down and you do the bottom up and you're coming up with exactly the same classes, you're doing one of them wrong. Basically, you're not doing one of them. If you come up with the same number of classes, same classes that you go with the top down and the bottom up, you are not doing one of them correctly. Most of the time, you're not doing the bottom up correctly. So that's why we're doing both of them, because we're going to be finding things. And I want you to experience that. Any questions so far? Okay, so we identify stuff over here. That would be, again, top down. We got the invoice, we got line item, we got the customer, and then we're going to be thinking about what classes do we need. And this is the part that is very important to me. Not all classes can be discovered from the program requirement. Not all classes are going to be discovered from top level or the things that we see. So that's why we need to kind of, for me, having a second one would be a way of doing it when we start sending things to India and China, because it was very much cheaper than here. We would sometimes have multiple companies to do the same design, and we would compare it to see what is missing in one design versus the other one. At that time, we were charging $130 per hour for consultant. And when we sent it to India, they were charging us about $12 per hour for the company. And this is the company that they were hiring good programmers. That's the reason things were going there. When I was working in Alpine, we had like 100 people in our facility in Torrance. They opened up a facility in China with 300 engineers, even with the PhDs and master's degree. 300 people over there with a huge facility. They were much, much cheaper than the office that we had over here. So that's the reason some of the work is shifted back there, but things are balancing it out. So if you want to be a good project manager, learn Chinese. Anyway.
There's more to it. There's more to that. Come on. It's more.
Well,
there's more layers to it, to project manager. It's not just, oh yeah, learn the language and that's it.
No, remember, the job of the project manager is to connect the business to the technical part. And if your technical people are in China, then you need somebody to translate those things. You can potentially have your whole operation in China and have your project manager, everybody over there. But the question is, where are you going to end up and what are you going to be doing? So if you are a project manager, you should be able to talk to your technical people. And that's what I'm saying. In India, they speak English. That was a good one. Philippines, they speak English. They speak English. Okay, so this is a class scheduling system that I gave to some of you guys to do something similar to this. What I want to go with it is the CRC card. And this is the last thing that I want to talk about. So we will create CRC card, and CRC card is going to be basically index card if you want to write it manually, or you can do it in software. So you can create a table and then merge the columns and the rows over here, or put a header for it. So this one, it goes the name of the class. Then we're gonna put what is the responsibility for this and what is the collaborators. So we're gonna get more detail on this as we go along. I wanna stop right here so we can spend some time on the homework and problems that we have for this week. And then we come back and we talk more about it for next week. So that's the starting point of getting our classes moved up. And I suggest you start working on your next assignment starting Sunday. That would be your final project. Take your requirement document, break it down to nouns and break it down to verbs, and identify the nouns that doesn't have good meaning and break it down to the smallest one. So you have to break your nouns to the smallest possible. So if I have the word student, I have to say, what is it that I'm talking about a student? Am I talking about a student name, or I'm talking about a student ID? When I say a student enrolled in a class, what is it that I'm talking about? What is it that I'm tracking of the students? Is that a student ID? Is that a student name? What is it that I'm tracking of? So those things, I need that, because if I don't have it, then in my final submission, I don't have those things in there. All right. Any questions on this chapter that we're going to continue on Tuesday next week?
I have a slightly different question.
Sure.
So I'm confused on what to submit for the create detailed requirement document for tomorrow. What are we supposed to specifically turn in?
So it's going to be, okay, I gave you guys a template. You can use that template. And the first part is talking about detailed requirement document. So basically, it's going to be a Word document explaining in detail what the project is going to be doing. So if I take your requirement document and I send it to Germany, people in there, they can write the program and send it back to you. The reason I'm saying that is because you have to be very detailed in your requirement document, explaining what is it that you want for this. So there is no assumption, there is no vague area. You explain everything about your project. So you are thinking about there is somebody in Germany, in Philippines, in India, in China, that's going to be writing the program for you. They're going to charge you a lot of money. If they don't understand the requirement document, they're still going to be charging you. So you want to explain in detail, what do you want them to write the program? This requirement document is not for you. It's for the people who are going to be writing the program. And you can, the reason I want to picture somebody else, because that way I would take my assumptions out. Was that clear, or you want me to explain a little more? Jonathan?
I have to like process the information. If anything, I'll just post it in the DQ when I have another question.
Okay.